thanks to the Guggenheim for having us share a night about the incredible music and story behind Bel Canto. And I just wanted to say to Anthony, congratulations. I know the film just premiered on Thursday night.
That's right. Yeah,
must feel great. How has the response been so far?
It's been incredible. Yeah, it's been amazing just to put it in front of an audience, and the response has been amazing. And you know, I can't really ask for much more. It's we've been at the theater a lot this weekend. We're only in one theater downtown, and we've been doing Q&As, and it's just incredible to have people, you know, walking up to you and talking about something that you've been working on for so long. So,
well, both you and Renee have a long association and deep association with this book by Ann Patchett, and I was curious why this kind of calls out for film and operatic treatment, because we have this powerful film, and Renee helped bring into being an opera about Bel Canto, or based on Bel Canto. So can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, it came to my attention through Mary Jo Heath, actually, who at that time, she's the voice of the Met, and she at that time was working at, I think, Get Music. It was a sort of a an online, yeah, exactly, a sort of an online site. And so she interviewed Anne and said, well, clearly this book is about Renée Fleming. And I said, well, I'd like to think I was a little nicer than Roxane. So she said to Anne, would you like to meet her? And she said, well, no, not really, no. She said, I write about the characters, but I don't necessarily need to meet them. And then she contacted Mary Jones. She said, no, actually, I would like to meet her. And we met in the canteen at the Met.
But she had been listening to your CDs.
Yes, so I was the musical model. I was one of the musical models. But what struck me as what made most of us know that I was in some way a model was the use of repertoire that was not widely sung at the time. So Rusalka, for sure, and Alcina, which, you know, no soprano historically at that time that I knew of had sung both of those roles. And then Anne and I became very good friends. In fact, she introduced me to my husband, so I owe her a lot.
David, I know that we're going to be taking like a deep dive into your music a little bit later, but had you been familiar with the book?
Yes, I read the book, which was good because when they asked me to audition for the film, I hadn't seen the film. So they told me about the film, and I said, oh, good, I read the book. I know what the story is. But you know, it's always hard if you're getting it without actually seeing the director's visual language, what they're doing with the camera, with the actors, the style. And they asked me, "What do you think? What's inspiring based on this story?" So I put together a few sketches, which all wound up in the film, which is really nice. That's very rare, but it was the kind of thing that the initial sketches that I did wound up in the film, which was very exciting.
Well, great. Well, we'll have a chance in this program to see a few clips and to hear some live music of David's, which is great. But Anthony, let's go back to you. The book came out in 2001. It was a huge bestseller and a sensation. Tell us about optioning the book and your journey to making the film that we have out this week.
Sure. So actually, Anne at first didn't really want to option the book, so I believe she was asked several times. And then my wife and
Caroline
partner, Caroline Barron, who is somewhere out there, and I'd love to just give her a big acknowledgement. She had been given the book by a friend of ours, and I guess this is the second hookup that came out of an Ann Patchett book, because she actually introduced, the same friend introduced Caroline and myself. So it's a nice little...
David, we're going to ask you.
Hey, wait a minute. Yeah. I feel left out here.
Anyway, Caroline really responded to the book and just really thought it would make a great film. And she and I had been talking about partnering. We hadn't been in business, and we hadn't married yet, and yet thought we would work together. And so we really, she showed me the book. I was blown away by it, and I just thought it jumped off the page. And I actually was in Tokyo when Caroline learned that Anne and Renee were speaking at Lincoln Center. And I think this is, I can't remember what the program was, but I told her over the phone, you know, go talk to her. And so Caroline went and talked to Anne, and they set up a breakfast meeting, and then we were able to option the material. And obviously, there was a long road after that.
As often happens with film projects.
Well, independent film, and it was a 17-year process putting it together. And it's kind of an interesting saga, which I'm going to go through every month and tell you exactly what happened.
Get comfortable.
No, I'm kidding. But it's a fascinating saga in the sense that it really involved, you know, what we always thought was that we wanted to nurture the material. This is kind of our MO as a company and as people, is that if we're going to option something, we really want to make it as it is written to some extent, and we want to represent authors. And so that's, I think, how we presented it to Anne, and that road took a long time because it's a challenging piece of material, and the business has changed dramatically as well.
I want to ask you about making a movie out of that material, but before that, just as a quick detour, Renée, tell us a little bit about the opera version that you helped shepherd through in Chicago.
So I brought the notion that what makes this material so fabulous for opera is that it's clear it's an ensemble piece. It's one set for the most part, so therefore cost-effective, and it's very powerful. And it's, of course, about the power of music in particular to bring people together. So that's a subject close to my heart. And Anthony Freud at Lyric Opera of Chicago was receptive, and I said, you know, typically how new operas are made is that one hires a composer who puts together the creative team and chooses the libretto. And I said, I said, there are so many great composers out there who would love to write for this story and set the story, and why don't we do it in that way? Say we want to produce this opera, this based on Ann Patchett's Bel Canto, and let's find the right composer for that. So the team, actually Peruvian composer, was the original hostage crisis on which the book is based, took place in Peru. Jimmy Lopez and Nilo Cruz, his librettist, did a fabulous job, I thought, of really bringing the story to life. And it is kind of a cast of thousands, but when we premiered it a few years ago, 700 people stayed after every single performance to talk about the piece. That's how exciting it was to them in Chicago. And of course, this was right after and right around the Paris terrorist attack. So people were especially upset and concerned. And so, you know, we want to create work that's relevant, and this certainly is.
Yeah, it feels very, very timely. You were talking about the difficulty of adapting a work, especially with a large cast for opera. Anthony, you're a co-screenwriter. So if I'm correct, you did the first draft of the script, and then you collaborated with director Paul Weitz on the final script for the movie. How do you go about doing that?
Well, it was not only one draft, because one of the perils of making a film like this is you often enter into collaborations that don't always work out. So there were several stops along the way with different collaborators, and each time I would collaborate with them on the material. So it took a while, but I think some of the things that make this a challenge as a piece of cinema are some of the things that make it so amazing as well, and certainly amazing as a book. You know, it's such a vast tableau of wonderful characters, and yet the way the story is told is, not surprisingly, through their thoughts and dreams. You get really deep into the characters in the book, and that's something very hard to represent on film. There were other challenges, of course, having to do with condensing the time, because over the time of the book, there's probably something like three or 4 months where they're in captivity. And we were really dead set against putting ellipses and, you know, 3 weeks later or things like that to advance time. So we really took it upon ourselves to condense that, as well as the use of language. I think that was probably one of the great challenges for say, some big American studio to get involved was that we really wanted to tell the story through the voices of these people, and many of them speak different languages. We had 7 different languages represented on set, and that created quite a challenge from a production standpoint, but it really helps to, I think, to create a film that's not only different, but that's representative of the story.
See, and that was so perfect for opera.
Yeah, I can
have all
only
those 7
imagine,
languages.
yeah.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And
When you go to
Roxane is
the Met
only-
cafeteria,
yeah,
you hear
exactly.
conversations
You can hear them from all.
in every corner.
And
And
plus we have super titles, so we have that advantage.
Right. I mean, and then the notion of shooting in one house. Everyone wants a movie to break out of wherever it is and do crazy stuff, and we just, it really is about what happens inside. Essentially, it's about a family that gets created inside a particularly terrible situation, but that's one of the great elements of it. It's a hostage drama. So.
Right. Well, one of the joys for me to be involved with this was the fun thing of reading through the book, and I know you and I did the same thing, was where every time an aria or an opera was mentioned, we kind of said, okay,
Sure.
this is a possibility. And Renee, when Anne was listening to the music, I mean, it's so clear that she was listening to you because it's Mozart and Haydn and Rusalka and a lot of the repertoire that you have sung over the years, and some things that one person probably wouldn't be singing, like Lucia and other things, but that's what's great about fiction. But back in the fall of 2016, there was a whole volley of emails with Anthony Paul White's the director, with Renee and Paul Batzel, who helped choose some of the music, about what music would work for which scene, and also it had to align with music that Renee had recorded or could record.
Right.
So let's talk
Yeah.
about that process a little
It was
bit.
an interesting process, actually. Me trying to figure out what would be most palatable to the audience, what would be most effective, with Paul Batzel, who's here tonight, and really just going back and forth and volleying about in terms of titles.
I mean, to back out a little bit, it's the amazing ability of a screenwriter to just dream and put everything in. So Anne probably had, I don't know, something like 30 plus at least mentions of pieces in the book. I think probably in my first draft, I must have had 8, which was crazy because that would have made quite a long film. But as it gets down the road, then things change because the dynamics of making a movie always are fluid. And, we were blessed all the way to have Renee on our team. And that was just, incredible, like, dance around the house and raise your arms kind of victory, when Renee said she would do the voice. So using your rep was not a problem. It was a great boon to us. I was curious about Visse d'arte. Is that something that you've sung a lot, or?
The aria, that's role, Tosca,
right? Yeah.
exactly, and that's a role that aria is sort of the most lyric moment in the opera, and everything else is much more dramatic.
Sure.
After that. And so I sing the aria really well and could never sing the role. So it's just there's a lot of repertoire like that. That the famous aria is not really representative of the rest of the writing. But the aria itself is stunning.
And we'll get to see the clip in a little bit
sure.
of Julianne with Renee's amazing voice coming.
Well, it's also the text,
the text, yeah.
It is, you're right.
The text around this idea that I live for art, I've lived for beauty, and how have I found myself in this position?
Right,
It
yeah.
mirrors perfectly what she is experiencing in that moment.
Well, it would be great to see the first clip. We're going to see, it's only 5 minutes into the film, so we see the moment when Roxane, the character played by Julianne Moore, meets Hosogawa, the Japanese industrialist played by Ken Watanabe. So let's see that, and we can talk a little more.
Great.
Señorita Gox, muy hermosa.
Oh, gracias.
You look lovely.
Good evening.
Thank you, Miss Gox.
Hola. Hello.
Mr. Sokawa, may I present Miss Roxane Kos? It is a great pleasure.
Oh, no, the pleasure's all mine. 'em. So I understand you would like to hear Rusalka?
Yes, of course.
Well, then,
ルサルカを望みですね。
一度ウィーンで聞かせていただきました。
Enjoyed hearing you sing it in Vienna.
Thank you.
ああ、止めてくれた一節。
If a human soul should dream of me, may he still remember me on awaking.
Oh, that's a poetic thought. I will finish my program with it.
歌ってくれるそうです。
You know it's Little Mermaid.
有名な人魚姫の話。
Yes.
But it's opera, so in the end, everybody dies.
オペラですから全員死にますと。
Shall we?
Yes.
Let's begin.
Monseñor, gracias por venir.
Gracias por invitarme. Él es un fanático de la ópera. Por poco me suplicó para que viniera esta noche.
Ah, ok. Espero que lo disfrute, padre.
Gracias.
Ven conmigo. Puedes esperar allá.
Libertario del Sur. Todos ustedes están bajo arresto. Venimos buscando al presidente Masuda.
Presidente Masuda, ¿dónde está?
Presidente Masuda, un paso al frente.
Bummer. I'm just amazed. I would hate to be at a party where Renee was singing and have that happen.
Just going back a little bit in that clip, Renee, I understand that you helped provide the text that they...
the joke.
The joke, yes.
That's right.
Is that normal for opera singers to provide lines to screenwriters?
When they're that good, it is.
Oh, in the recording session, I made that joke about Rusalka, which I often do in concert, and she said, "Oh, can I use that?" I said, "Oh, the highest form of flattery, of course."
Yeah, some of the best jokes were added by either Renee in that case, or Julie added one later. That was fantastic.
This is about it's opera, then everybody dies. Right. So you take a Disney film and really make it, operize it.
Yeah.
So Rusalka is really an important piece of music in this film. It bookends the film at the beginning, and then it's part of the heart-wrenching scene at the end. But Renee, it's a piece of music that's been associated with you since the very beginning. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, you know, I have Czech great-grandparents, and somebody recommended to me at one point that I learn Song to the Moon. I said, you know, I learned it in undergraduate school in English, so I had to relearn it in Czech. And it became the piece that sort of helped me really break out in my career. I won the Met competition with it and a couple of other competitions. And at that time, it really wasn't that well known. And then the role, I became associated with the role and sang it, I think, in 6 or 7 different productions around, between Europe and the US, and have always loved it, absolutely loved the role. The music is spectacular, Dvořák, of course. But Song to the Moon is especially beautiful. I think people always respond well to it.
We are not going to see the clip from the film because it would scoop it for you for when you go to the movie theaters and see it. But we do have just a minute from a recording that Renee did with Sir George Solti and the London Symphony Orchestra. So if we could just hear that, because then you can have it in your ears. I think it's great that there's a soundtrack that's available for Bel Canto that has David's beautiful, beautiful music, and also this aria and other things that Renee is singing, so you can listen to the music at home. Anthony, why this aria? Why this choice to be kind of the pivotal classical piece that you hear in this film?
It's not going to be a long answer. It's gorgeous and meaningful symbolically, and it's, you know, again, as Renee was saying, one of her greatest pieces that she's done over and over again. And I don't have much more of an answer than that. It's just an incredible piece of music that had so much meaning as bookends to the film. So that was never a question.
And David, as a composer, what's your response to the piece? It's just so lyrical.
It's so moving. It's so moving. I mean, that's the whole purpose of music. I don't speak Czech. When I first heard the piece, I had to really look up the translation. You know, I had no clue. I'd never heard it. And it's just so beautiful and so terrifying when you start a score and that's what you're listening to first.
Match Dvořák.
Don't set the bar too high or anything.
Actually, one anecdote was that, you know, Julie really spent a lot of time and energy, obviously, to really portray the music accurately. And in this case, not only did she learn how to lip sync it, but she learned the Czech. So.
Yes, a Met coach gave me the phonetics.
Oh, fantastic.
And Gerald Martin Moore, who is an incredible coach and
yes.
also is a pianist who works with Renee a lot, coached Julie extensively on the Czech. The other languages were not so, I think, difficult for Julie, but Czech, especially when you look at it on a piece of paper, it's a lot of consonants.
Oh, it's so hard. I mean,
yeah.
You know, there's a word that is only 7 consonants, and you.
What is the word?
Yeah, I first sheets, and when I first learned it, I said, "I'm sorry, but I have to sing a tone, so we've got to make up a vowel if there isn't one." And so that's where the E in that word comes from. But it's wow. Really hard. It's extremely difficult, the language. Once you do one thing, it's fine. But the Italian wasn't so bad. You know, obviously there was a vocalese used. But still, it's hugely time-consuming, what she had to do.
Yes.
To learn how to sync in the language with the right sounds.
And I know Gerald really worked with her on the breath to make it look natural and to make it look like she was producing those sounds. And she would get the text on her phone and just the clip of the aria of Renee that she needed to practice and practice and practice. And I know she's one of the most hardworking people I've seen.
Incredible professional.
Yeah.
I mean, when I recorded the excerpts from the film, because they were all recorded fresh, she sat 5 feet in front of me so she could watch how my body was, how my mouth was, you know, how I looked when I was singing, stature, posture. And we talked a lot about those things. And I wasn't really around enough to be more helpful than that, but I'm glad Gerald was.
I know she did observe you in the Richard Tucker Gala, and, you know, and she came to the rehearsals at the Metropolitan Opera to just observe singers, their posture, their carriage, everything.
Well, she and her husband, I love the fact that they both said at the Richard Tucker rehearsal, the gala rehearsal, she said how amazed she was at how each person sounded so completely differently. And you can't really easily get that on television, for instance, where you might also see opera or opera singers. So they were really pleasantly surprised.
The piece that we hear, Ombra di Nube, that Roxane sings when the takeover happens, we're going to have the pleasure of hearing the whole thing live since it gets interrupted. Marguerite Jones, the soprano, and Ken Noda, the pianist, will do a performance of that now, and then we can talk about that piece.
so
Gerald
great to hear
told
live
me
music.
that that piece is incredibly difficult to sing. And
Well, they're long phrases, but one of the reasons we suggested it is because Rafice, who composed it, was in South America.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was a very powerful connection. It's also quite spiritual song about maintaining peace, calm, and light. You know, please give me that and allow me to maintain that. It's a beautiful text.
Yeah, that was something that Paul was really interested in, was trying to find music that may have a Latin American influence, not necessarily sound so Latin American, but we'll hear that, I think, in the Bachianas as well. It has a kind of a Latin sound, so.
Well, I mean, I think the musical choices work very well in the scenes, and we were talking before about Vici d'arte, I Lived for Art, I Lived for Love, the Puccini aria from Tosca. I want to go back to that for a second, because Renée, when you and Julianne were in the studio, and we're going to see a clip from that scene, you were going to do the music and the performance for her, forced to sing at gunpoint, having not sung for how long?
Well, probably at least a week. Yeah.
Right? So I know that you and she worked, first of all, having to sound rusty and like your technique needs to be goosed is kind of an absurd idea. But you were together, and because in the story she hasn't sung because she's been in this hostage situation, she doesn't have her breath, she doesn't have her support. How did you and Julianne talk about how to make that convincing and for how you should sing it for her to then reenact it?
In the recording session, I gave several examples of a tentative start to this, the notion of finding your voice. And then whatever was finally chosen in the end, because all of the music was complete before the filming began, so that she had enough time to learn it and really try to be able to connect with what was already recorded. So it's whatever Paul chose from those examples that I gave.
But it was wonderful. You gave us a lot of choices, and one was a stop and a start, and that's what ended up in the final product. And it actually inspired a moment after she stops, which I think we're going to see that.
Yeah, actually, why don't we see that? Because I think it is a perfect introduction. So this is the clip. It comes much later. It's about 40-odd minutes into the film, so they've been in a hostage situation for a little while.
¿Por qué nos ayudan?
Why are you helping them?
Because you need water. And I don't want anyone else to get killed.
Well, that's muy good.
Hey. ¿Usted no?
Por favor.
No. Usted no canta.
It's okay, please.
No disparo. Don't shoot. Do not shoot.
You sure they won't shoot? Not everyone likes opera.
Ándale.
Okay.
Holy shit.
Listo! I don't need that. No es bueno. I want to start over.
What happened?
I haven't sung in a week. I would like to start over.
Are you able to do it?
Yes, if you stop talking.
¡Otra vez! ¡Desde el principio!
¡Empieza!
Piensa otra vez, apúrale.
was one of the more unique concerts I've attended.
How did I do?
Mientras soldados y espectadores escuchaban un concierto improvisado por la secuestrada Roxane. Se ha cerrado el flujo de agua a la mansión para presionar a los captores. Los rehenes también sufren las consecuencias.
Look at her again. She's staring right at you. I would like to speak to her. Be my translator. You speak Spanish? He's quite good at it.
¿Hablas español?
Poco. Todos podemos hablar el español.
Anthony, where was that shot?
That was shot in two places, actually. The film's interiors were shot in Yonkers. Yes, it's true. It's
Yonkers,
true.
right?
Yonkers.
Yonkers.
Yeah, we shot most of the movie in Yonkers in a mansion, and that was for many reasons, but mostly because Julie wanted to remain fairly close to home for the majority of the shoot. The other location, as I think I might have mentioned, was Mexico City, where we shot all the exteriors and matched them. So actually this shot, which you see the pianist, which is played by Christopher Lambert, is inside, and then we go outside back to Julie on the terrace, is a shot that's been wedded together between the two locations, and that's, I think, one of the only ones, actually. So that's the magic of cinema right there. The rest was just backgrounds, and then there's something that occurs later on in the movie, which is on the exteriors. So.
And the pianist in the movie, it happens to be the French ambassador.
Yeah, he's
who
the French.
Happens to be able to play piano because they need a pianist
right.
in the house.
Right. There's quite a nice scene where they're looking for someone who can play piano, and he just sits down and starts playing some Scott Joplin.
Which Renee, David Frost, your music producer in the studio, he actually played the Joplin that you hear. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
We actually had to mess him up.
Yeah.
Because he did it.
He was too good.
He did it note perfect.
I see.
And so we had to kind of destroy it a little bit. But.
We're going to move so we can get to David's music and also talk about the Bacchianis. But can you set up, Anthony, the Bacchianis clip that
Sure.
we're going
So
to hear?
this is one of the montages in the film. I think it's easy to submit to the notion of montage, especially in a movie like this. And I think that's a tribute to Paul, that he really didn't want to do too much of it. It's a beautiful way to track time, and it shows how you can develop things. This is one of the montages you just saw, which I think is quite clever, how he kind of attached it to the end of a longer scene. But this scene is when they've got a little bit more comfortable in the house, and Paul did a good job of almost trying to theme the use of montage. And this one is kind of, I would call it a love montage, which is I think why the music's so appropriate. It tracks the secondary love story, if you will, between that young rebel girl and the interpreter. And there's some, I think Roxane and Hosokawa are also in this montage as well.
All right, well, let's take a look and then we'll talk more.
Good job. So can I go like that?
No.
¿Tú quieres ser mi hermanito?
Sí, María.
¡Híjole! ¡Qué suavena!
Are you married?
Are you married?
Muy bien. Torpe. Clumsy.
No goal.
Oh, permiso.
So David,
Yes.
one of your challenges as the composer for the film was to come up with something that reflected the place where the story was being shot, but also that music that we just heard of, Villa-Lobos. We want to know about the kinds of things challenges that presented, and we're going to hear two of the pieces that you wrote that are in this kind of in the same vein of the piece that we just heard. But also, when you started on the film, what was your brief? What were you trying to achieve, generally speaking?
This was a really great experience because beginning any film is so difficult, especially if you don't have the film yet, if you're just auditioning or trying to give ideas to the director as to what they might want. I found that no matter how experienced the director is, no matter how many films they've done, there's always this nervous energy when it comes to putting music in, because it's a whole other character. You can completely change the direction of a film based on what music you're writing. When I was told about the film, I hadn't seen anything yet, and I was only told that it was Bel Canto, and I knew the story. And it was very lucky in a way that the sketches that I did were very much like the Bachianas, but I had no idea the Bachianas was in the film. So when I finally got the film and I saw and heard that the Bachianas, I was like, oh, this is so great, it matches, and that's a really wonderful thing. In terms of the approach or the palette, the story doesn't refer to any specific country. I knew that there were events loosely based on Peru and things that happened in Peru in reality, but we don't mention what country we're in the film, which I really love. I love any films that are nondescript like that, the sort of Wakanda, if you've seen Black Panther or anything like that. There's this world that it doesn't matter what country we're in. It could be any place where people go to extreme measures when they're suffering. And the idea was to try to find instruments that would not reflect a particular country. If I chose, for example, a berimbau, you would know that that's Brazil, and that's specifically Brazil. And then if I use that, then it has an implication of, well, are we referring to Brazil? Did this happen in Brazil? So I didn't want that. So I was looking for something that could cut across an orchestra, but that was also had a Latin influence, but also something that maybe no one had heard. And just as fate would have it, I met this woman who was moving to Mexico in LA, and she said, I'm selling some things on my way to Mexico. And I went and saw her studio, and she had this instrument there called a timple, T-I-M-P-L-E, timple. And I'd never heard of a timple. I didn't know what that was. So it was very exciting. I looked on the wall. She had two of these timples, and I said, what is that? And she said, oh, it's a timple. It's a lot of them are from the Canary Islands, something they're called the timple de Canarios. It's Canary Islands. But they are used in many different parts of Latin America. So it could be anywhere. It could be Peru, it could be Chile, it could be Uruguay. And so I took it off the wall, and as soon as I picked it up, it was magical. It was like a spirit came through the instrument. Any musicians experience this. Sometimes when you pick up a certain instrument, it has a magic to it. And I started playing this, and I said, I have to have this. I have to have this. How much is this? How much will you sell this? She says, it's not for sale. And I said, I said, oh, come on, please. I said, you don't understand, I'm about to start a project that's really important, and I need this. And I didn't want to pressure her. She said, oh, well, I have another one that was on the wall. I said, okay, so you have two, and you need two hands to play one, so how about letting go of the other one? She says, well, let me think about it. And I said, okay. I said, I promise that I'll make something beautiful with it if you decide to sell it. Please sell it. So the next day, she decided to sell it, and I was very happy about that. And that sound I used throughout the whole film, this timple sound. It came to represent Carmen for me, the character, who is a bit of a ruffian. She's very young, she's very innocent, and here she is with this giant machine gun that she can barely even hold. That's the character who's falling in love with the Japanese translator. Yes, that's who, right. And what was fun about the whole process was I'd never played a timple before. I play guitar, I play piano, I play bass, play a number of different instruments. When you first pick up an instrument and you're going to try to record a score with it and you've never played the instrument before, it's terrifying, especially because you're going to have classical musicians on the score and, oh, I don't know, Renée Fleming singing on it. So I was really nervous about learning this instrument within the 3 or 4 days that I had to start submitting sketches. But it turned out to be a great blessing because approaching the instrument as a novice was fantastic because Carmen is a novice. She's rough and tumble. She's not refined. She's not from the opera world. There are these dichotomies in the film that I picked up on that I really enjoyed, the dichotomy of the rich and the poor, and these, and also of women soldiers. These are women with machine guns. You don't see that. Those kinds of things were really inspirational to me. So when I actually recorded those sketches, those wound up in the film with my raw playing on it, like first, second takes kind of a thing. And it worked really well. I didn't want to go back and refine it the way that the classical guitar is used in the film. The classical guitar pieces are refined and they're played very well. It was a nice dichotomy to have that rawness against the refinement of the classical playing. I really enjoyed that. And Renée, when you heard these sketches with just a voice placeholder, you had a very strong response to David's music.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's very evocative sounding, and also, despite this kind of gentle, and the suggestion really of something that is Latin, that is has that flavor to it, but there's also this murmuring, this constant tension as well. I mean, I think I love it. I actually really enjoy listening to it. Well done, David.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Likewise. You heard it here.
And I also heard it and said, I need to record that part because people will assume that it's me. And so let me be represented really in all of the vocal music.
That was huge because my demos, I wasn't sure if Renée was going to be available for any. I had no idea. So for the demo recordings, for the things that Paul heard, I had used an LA session singer who's wonderful, and she sings in choirs and teaches opera in Los Angeles. And I remember telling, I think it was either Paul or Caroline, and I said, I don't want to be sitting in the audience if there's a session singer and then Renée, because that might be a little uncomfortable.
I remember I happened to be in LA where David is based, where all great film composers tend to live, and you sent me the placeholder tracks, and you said, do you think there's any way Renée would want to sing these? And I heard them, and I was like, yes. Yes,
they're really beautiful too, and it was a painless process because the voice, the little bit that I recorded was layered in this absolutely beautiful way.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased with it.
That was a huge bonus.
And it does kind of relate very well to Bachianas Brasileiras. It has that same kind of
the vocalese.
Exactly, the vocalese.
Yeah.
Well, Marguerite Jones is going to come back and do just the first 2 minutes of the Bachianas Brasileiras, number 5, leading into kind of a little suite of 2 of David's vocalises. Is it Hostage Life in the Garden? Is that the order?
Yes.
Yes. And they're going to be joined for this, Marguerite will be joined for the second part by Ensemble 63, which actually played here for the Mozart in the Jungle Night earlier this year. Amelia Dietrich, violin, Emma Frucht, violin, Emily Liu, viola, and Clare Bradford cello. So I'm going to invite all the musicians to come and do this little suite.
I don't know, David, what about creating a Bel Canto suite? We're always looking for music to perform with string quartet. This would be perfect. Just planting that seed. Just planting that seed.
That sounds excellent.
Sounds like a good idea. I'm on board.
You can find the time.
I'll find time for that.
Tell us actually about, you were talking about these instruments you used in the actual score. You're so facile at, you know, when I said what musical forces we would have, which is a string quartet or trio, and then you're like, okay, and then you just reorchestrated for the forces. Is it just something that you are particularly skilled at because you're a composer working in LA and film, or is it just part of your training?
Well, those pieces originally in the film are guitar, mainly guitar, and adapting the energy of the piece from the film for a quartet is something you just have to really think through, and also given the amount of time you have or the time you have to rehearse and what it, you know, how long you want it to be. So there are a lot of factors in that. But for me, it's all about capturing the spirit of what it is. One thing I will say, when any of the parts where I use or work with Renée doing the vocalese on the score, the non-aria things, the things that were part of score, for me, the voice was supposed to be a spirit. It's like a spirit that moves through the house and connects all these people, and it's supposed to be very beautiful, and it brings love, but it's also the Grim Reaper and can bring death. And so there's this haunting sort of quality with the beauty that I wanted to go for with that voice. In a quartet environment like this, what's nice about this is that it brings out more of that elitism of the opera world that's in the film. The dichotomies are brought out more simply because it's quartet, because you're used to associating with that, you know, with a highbrow culture, so to speak. And in the film, it's both. There's an orchestra playing, and there's the classical guitar, and there's also the timbre. And so the ensemble that you use, no matter what ensemble it is, always will have its own language and its own meaning attached to it, you know, however you arrange that. For me, it's about, though, capturing the spirit and the energy more than anything else, regardless of what the ensemble is.
Well, and I love the fact that we were talking about this earlier. I didn't really know that much about how film music is put together. For instance, I didn't realize that you could compose an entire film, you know, and really sections that were meant to coexist with certain scenes, and then ultimately could be used somewhere else or not be used, or that you in the end don't have that much control over how the music is used.
A lot of times, yeah, it's such a different world, the world of film composition versus you know, what you could call serious work. I don't mean that in a facetious way. I mean that's what ASCAP calls it in terms of serious music and popular music. That's the label. There's either serious music and there's popular music.
You have to tell them what ASCAP is, just in case.
Yeah, any ASCAP raps, you know. But the idea behind all of these pieces is to really capture that energy and that spirit. You know, that's what it's about. Yeah.
ASCAP is the music licensing entity. I just don't know if you're in the music business, so if you know
American Society of Composers and Publishers, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other revelation to me, because I worked with Alexander Desplat for Shape of Water this past year, and Guillermo del Toro rented out this large, enormous theater in New York just for me to watch the film, to decide if I would do it or not, as if I had to be convinced. And then said, you know, leaned over and said, "Would you like some popcorn?" That was my sort of favorite moment. I'm already completely, I should have just said, yes, you don't have to show the film. And, but there was all this music, and I said, well, where'd the music come from? The music hasn't been composed yet. And so what the revelation for me was that nobody who makes a film will ever show anyone the film without some music. Which tells us, you know, how important music is in the film. It really makes a huge difference, and yet it's something most of us take for granted.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because people always ask me, "What's your favorite film? What's your favorite film?" It's always a hard thing to, you know, say what your favorite film is. But my two favorite films are completely diametrically opposed musically. Amadeus is a perfect film for me. I mean, it just is perfect, and you can't go wrong with the music because it's Mozart. But one of my other favorite films is Network, which has no music. The whole film is no music at all, because that's the purpose of that film, has to deal with how media and music and the news can manipulate. And so you have no music in that film. And one of the most challenging aspects of writing for film is time. In the symphonic world, you could maybe get a year or 2 or 3, depending on what your commission is, to write. In film, what, 12 weeks at maximum? Like,
well,
if
you
you're
and
lucky.
Paul White said as shorthand, because you had worked. You and Paul White said as shorthand, because you had worked together before.
Oh,
well, kind of at the same time.
Well, you know, every director is nervous about music, like I was saying before. With Paul, actually, here's a funny story. Okay, so when I first started working on Bel Canto, Paul was going to Japan to shoot Mozart in the Jungle. And he said, okay, I'm going to Japan. If you could get me some things quickly, by the time I land and get situated, I can hear a lot of sketches. The most nerve-wracking part of any film is the first sketch. What are they going to say? You want to make sure that they like it. You're in the film, you want to make sure that they like it, you want to make sure the momentum is there, you're going in the right direction. So I said, okay, so I wrote a lot very, very quickly, very stream of consciousness, just sort of instinctually writing. And I sent this all, you know, very quickly. And in the middle of this, Mozart in the Jungle calls, and they said, well, can we commission you for a few pieces for Mozart in the Jungle? And I was like, And normally I wouldn't take both gigs, because that would be, you know, too much pressure. But Paul does both. He's doing Bel Canto and Mozart in the Jungle, and he's on a plane to Japan. He'll never know. So I very quickly wrote these sketches for Mozart in the Jungle in the middle of writing for Bel Canto.
It's the same music supervisor for both projects.
The music supervisor is the same
yeah.
for Bel Canto as Mozart in the Jungle, so they know what pressure they're putting on me for it. So I write this stuff, and a few days goes by, and I don't hear anything from Paul, and then he's like, he calls me and he says, so should I worry about Mozart in the Jungle? And I said, no, we're all good. I'm still working on Bel Canto too, and it all worked out okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
well, we're going to see the clip, Carmen's Fantasy, and then hear a little bit more of your music. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit, just briefly, because we could talk for hours, but about Carmen's Fantasy and the music.
Yeah, this scene's so beautiful. For me, this scene is the whole movie. Or I should say, this scene is the palette. That's how I got the palette. It's what inspired me. This is the first time that I realized that everything is not what it seems. There's a sort of what some people call magical realism about it, where you're in reality, but there are things that are happening that are fantasy-like. There are certain realities that are being challenged. Music in this film is the escape for everyone. The music is the way that they escape from their reality. And I love this scene because it really, really spoke to me as far as the whole palette of the film, in that we're in a world where, yes, there is a hostage situation, yes, there are people that are under duress, but they can all escape through their mind or through music. And that's when I first got the timple, and that's when I first really started writing for Carmen. It was very inspirational, this scene. I just loved it.
All right, let's see that clip.
Chicago es una ciudad hermosa.
hermosa. Okay.
No es mi único estudiante.
どういう意味だ？
カルメンにスペイン語の読み書きを、あと英語も。
私よりいい生徒なのかな、彼女。
ええ、極めて優秀です。あんな子は大学にもいませんでした。
あ、いいよ。¿Escos? Chicago es una ciudad hermosa.
Chicago is a beautiful city. Yes, I'm from Chicago. Did I tell you that? It is. It's very beautiful. It's cold in the wintertime. Very, very cold. And in the summer, it's hot, almost unbearably hot.
シカゴはとっても美しい街で。
No, don't translate that, because he doesn't need to know that I'm an idiot. It's okay.
どうかな?
Is that me? It is?
Sí.
Oh, I see.
Se está enamorando de él.
La señora Cos. ¿Enamorada del señor Osokawa? ¿Ella te dijo esto?
Quizás. Me habla a veces en las mañanas, cuando cuido su habitación. Pero no la entiendo. Deberías de enseñarme más rápido.
¿Y la señora Osokawa?
La señora Osokawa vive en Japón, millones de kilómetros de aquí. Además, no va a volver a casa.
¿Qué quieres decir con eso? ¿Que no va a volver a casa?
Ahora vivimos aquí.
Pues no será para siempre. Solo tenemos unos minutos. Quiero hablar de lo que me dijiste. ¿Quieres decir con ahora vivimos aquí?
Piénsalo bien que sería tan terrible si todos nos quedáramos a vivir aquí.
Pero esto tiene que acabar, tarde o temprano. Estos asuntos no son para siempre.
Aquí nadie es infeliz.
Aquí todos estamos infelices.
¿Tú no eres feliz?
Carmen.
That was actually the other Julianne Moore ad-lib when she says, he doesn't have to know that I'm an idiot.
So we hear, is that the timbre?
Timbre.
Timbre that we hear.
Yeah, the triplets, and those are that's the timbre.
Don't you have one back there?
I
Break
forgot
out.
my timbre, sorry.
One of the comments that you've made, I think, about the highbrow and the juxtaposition, one of the storylines that I love is the fact that one of the young Garias is an aspiring opera singer. It turns out because he hears Roxane rehearsing and singing, and you saw him a couple times. Actually, Ethan Simpson, the actor and opera singer, is here tonight. But you hear him trying to vocalize, and it becomes a part of the movie. And Renée, you got to spend a little time in the studio with him because one of the scenes that Roxane does with this character is she gives him a lesson, and which goes back to this kind of highbrow, this mixing and everything coming together. Can you talk?
Right, and I recommended the language that would be used in a lesson, how you would work with the beginning singer, with the kinds of things you would say that were ultimately incorporated into the text. But it was fascinating to find out that he's from Curtis and that also he didn't speak Spanish.
Right.
So like all of us who are trained classically, we have to learn how to either learn these languages or learn them by rote. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And he's incredibly convincing. What a wonderful actor, too.
He was great, and it was his first film role. And yeah, he sings in Philly currently.
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, which is, Curtis is one of the greatest conservatories that we have in the U.S., a really gifted singer. So we'll hear more from him, I think, in the future, either as an actor or as a singer, or hopefully both. I tell young singers all the time now, the more versatile you are, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you work extensively with young singers to train them and give them advice. I mean, you're very generous with your time that way.
I enjoy very much doing that, mostly in a masterclass setting, but it is really rewarding, and every voice is different, and it's also fun for the audience to follow young singers and see how they do, what happens to them. You can take ownership in each individual voice and talent.
Mm-hmm. So we have one last piece of music of David's. It's called "Ending the Siege," and David, it must be so challenging to write works that are full of beauty when what happens in the film can be very, very violent and distressing. Can you talk about creating the music that we're about to hear, that Ensemble 63 will play?
Mm-hmm, Well, my approach when it comes to writing for film and when it comes to working with directors is to hardly ever talk about music, is to really never talk about music, actually. Because you can go down a rabbit hole. What everybody interprets as musical or whatever instrument they're hearing in their head is it's so subjective that if you suddenly say, oh, I'd like to write piano here, or I'd like to put a trumpet here, it means so many things to different people. So I try to just focus on the narrative, on the story. What is the story saying that music needs to fill the gap of? So when you're working on a film, what's the film not saying that the music needs to say? That's my general approach to how to work with where music should go. Because I find the hardest thing is where music shouldn't go. If you can answer where it shouldn't go, then you can work backwards from there. It's kind of like knowing where not to play, or where not to sing, or where to breathe. And so sometimes there may be something that is violent on screen, or something that you would think immediately causes duress when you're watching it, but you don't necessarily want to reflect the violence because that's already what you're seeing. And so many times I will approach a scene and go the opposite direction and write something that's more of a meditation, or more of something that is not so violent, because we're bringing something out of that scene that you're not seeing without music. So most of the time I try to really ask directors, what is it that you want either the audience to feel here, or what is it that you want to say that's not being said already? And when you go the opposite direction from what you're seeing on camera, it's really a wonderful experience, because then you suddenly see the power of music bringing something that you didn't have before. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just know that we are running short of time, so I just wanted to say that we'll bring Ensemble 63 out to play Ending the Siege, which is one of the last pieces of music that you'll hear in the film. Wow. That was Ensemble 63. We've come to the close of the program, and I just want to thank them and Marguerite Jones and Ken Noda. And I know it's been an incredible journey, not only for you and Caroline, but for Lizzie Friedman from Priority Pictures and Paul Weitz's production company. It's a really special, beautiful film, and it's been an honor.
Can I say one more thing?
You certainly can.
It's very rare as a producer that we get, after the film is out, that we get to do anything publicly with the crew, and in this case, the music department almost on the stage, although there were several others, obviously. But I just wanted to thank you guys because you did such an amazing, amazing job on this movie. Thank you.